My name is Amit Ray. I'm the CEO of a company called GoPlaces. We started this company about a year back, and it's my honor to be here with you. So I'm actually the topic of my presentation is starting up, because I'm going to talk about some learnings that we've had from this experience starting a new company. But in reality, I want all of you to think of this as starting anything new, right? My experience is with starting a new company, but many of you will have interest in starting something, whenever it is, not even necessarily now. So don't think of this only as something related to a company, but try and think of this a little more broadly. So starting a company essentially is about creating order from chaos, right? Because startups by their very nature are chaotic things. You're trying to start with something brand new and then create something out of it. And so what I'm going to do over the next 15 minutes is essentially take the lessons that we've learned and try and communicate that to you as 5 stages that I think every startup goes through in going from complete chaos to some semblance of order, in moving from a startup to being like an actual organization. But before we go into those 5 stages, I think it's important for all of us to spend a minute or so trying to understand the nature of an entrepreneur. So to do that, I'd like to try an experiment. So I want all of you to close your eyes and think about a person that embodies the word entrepreneur to you. So just close your eyes for a second and think of an entrepreneur. Okay, so I hope you've thought of somebody. And I'm going to try and see if in the next 3 slides, I can try and show you somebody who's very similar, not necessarily the same person, as someone that you've thought of. Okay, I will try the next 3 slides. Good. So, you may have thought of either this very person, so this is the person who started Facebook, or maybe somebody very like him. Essentially a sort of .com kind of a person building something on the internet and something like that. You may have thought of someone like the next person. Does anyone know who this is? Okay, I kind of heard it. So this is Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw. She started a biotech company called Biocon. Or you may have thought of someone like her, like a more corporate sort of entrepreneur. Maybe, like Sunil Bharti Mittal or somebody like that. Or, you may have actually thought of someone like this guy. So does anyone know who this is? Okay, so this is a person called Pranav Mistry. He came up with the 6th sense device. And so he is kind of like a technologist whose vision may actually end up revolutionizing pretty much the world, right? So these are 3 people that I wanted to kind of show you. And I want to check, so did I get this kind of right? How many of you thought of somebody like one of the 3 people that I showed you? Can you show me your hands? Okay, reasonable number of hands, right? So I kind of got it right. So if this is the sort of person who's in your mind when you think of the word entrepreneur, then I think it's time to change that, that concept. Because an entrepreneur really is someone like this. So this is actually my son. He's 3 years old now. And the reason why I'm trying to say that an entrepreneur is essentially a toddler is because they share a lot of characteristics. One is that an entrepreneur is essentially very naive. Like you think you're going to do something, but you don't know how big that problem is. But you think you're going to do it anyway. In addition, an entrepreneur is extremely confident. Because you need to be. You're trying to start something new, you better have the confidence that you will do it. In addition, an entrepreneur is someone who is extremely curious. And again, you need to be. Because if you're trying something new, you need to be able to take feedback. Many people give you advice, you read of various things and so on and so forth. So essentially you need to be curious, you need to keep trying things. Finally, an entrepreneur is very charming, like this guy out here. And the reason why I say that is because, when you start a company and you have no money and you want people to help you do things, you better be really charming. Okay, so what is it that toddlers really like to do? one of the things that they like to do most is play. And one of the things that Siddharth does a lot of is play with Lego blocks. So, I mean, I hope most of you know what Lego is, right? So these are these building blocks that you put them together and build things. So he does this like almost every evening. He comes back home and then he takes out his Lego pieces, he spreads it all on the floor, then he puts it together and he builds something fairly interesting. And if he asks me to come and play with him, I build the same thing every day and kind of irritate him. And then it's bedtime, so then we make him put it all away and then he goes to sleep. And then the next evening he comes, he takes out all the Lego pieces, he builds something new, he takes it apart and goes to sleep. And the same thing the next day and the day after that. So why is it that he does this every day? Why do you think he does this every day? Yeah, so I heard trying to come up with something new. Essentially, this is something that he loves doing, right? Why do any of us do things repeatedly every day? Sometimes because it's forced on us, but sometimes because we like to do that. So he really likes this act of taking a whole bunch of things on the floor and making something out of it. Okay, and so the thing is that he really desires to do this all the time, right? And that is the first stage in becoming an entrepreneur. Most of us talk about it. All of you know people who may have wanted to start things and then there's not enough money and then no security, blah blah. But if you have the desire, you will find a way to do it and you will get into the game. So stage one of creating order out of chaos in a startup environment is to want to do it. Okay, so again, many of you have played with Lego. This is how most Lego projects start, right? You start with this whole mess of pieces. They're various colors, they're various shapes, various sizes. The new Lego things come with embedded chips and whatnot inside them. And you really have no idea how to begin. Now, what any of us would do as being extremely unimaginative adults is that we go to the box and see if there's some sort of blueprint inside it, right? So we look for the plan and then we'll start building whatever the box says that we have to build. But first of all, in Siddharth's case, he has lost all those things wrong, so there's no plan. Second of all, if you are starting something new, there is no plan, right? That's why it is something new. And that's not such a bad thing, because in reality, if all of us had a blueprint to begin our businesses or our new ventures with, all of our ventures would look exactly the same. And if they all looked exactly the same, then what's the fun in doing it, right? If my thing looks the same as somebody else's, there's no competition. We're both making the same thing. So it's a good thing actually to not have this blueprint, but you still need to get started. So how do you do it? In the context of Lego, you start by trying to figure out what it is that you want to make. Do you want to make a castle? Do you want to make a building? Do you want to make a farmhouse? What do you want to make? And once you know that, you will broadly know which pieces fit into that and which ones don't fit at all, right? In the context of starting a business, the first thing that you need to figure out is what business are you in? What are you building, right? And once you decide that, all your decisions after that, for probably years and years to come, are made that much simpler, because you know what goes into that vision and what does not go into that vision. And so therefore, the most important thing that you will do after you get into being an entrepreneur is to build your vision. So this is stage 2. Know what business you're in, and then all your decisions after that have to be taken in that context. In our company's case, we actually started out being or wanting to be a do-it-yourself travel company. So the intent was we will cater to independent travelers and give them everything online that they need to become to make their travel worthwhile. But fact is that we actually, once we made that thing, we realized that we didn't actually like doing most of that stuff. What we liked was the history and heritage part of it. And so therefore, we decided to narrow our vision to being a history and heritage company. And that, I think, has been a fantastic decision for us, because we have limited resources, and now we can apply those resources to doing one thing extremely well, rather than trying to do too many things for too many people. Okay, so now Siddharth didn't start off as like an outstanding architect, right? So his first attempts at making Lego pieces looked like this. Now for his doting parents, this was absolutely fantastic, and we clapped and shouted and told our friends. But for all practical Lego building purposes, this is not a good start. So he kept at it though. So he didn't let that, he didn't get discouraged with all the terrible stuff he was building. And he kept doing it day in and day out and so on. And he kept building some, what I would consider, works of modern art like the one on the right. But he also built some useful things like the one on the left here. And he kept doing this. So as he kept on with it, he made more and more of the useful looking things and fewer of the modern art kind of things. And so the way that he was doing it essentially was experimenting. He would take any old piece, stick it together and see if it works. And that is the next stage in evolving your startup venture, your company, whatever, which is experiment. So now that you have a vision and you have a lot of different ideas because people have told you a lot of things, you need to keep trying them out and seeing what works for you within the context of your vision, and more importantly, what doesn't work for you, right? So that is the stage of experimentation. And you may actually feel as you're going through it, we feel that quite often, that you're spending way too much time trying out new things, but I think it helps build a fairly solid foundation. Okay, so now that Siddharth had been making a few useful looking things, he remembered them. So what happens today is that when he starts out his Lego projects, he actually starts by quickly assembling the things that he already knows. So he makes, let's say, 2 of these and 3 of something else and so on. And then uses that as the starting point to build whatever bigger thing it is that he wants to do. And this means that he has essentially taken a learning from an experiment and made it repeatable. And that is what I call process. I mean, everybody calls it process, but that is a stage that I would like to call process. And this is something that I think a lot of startups don't pay enough attention to. We are as guilty of it sometimes as anybody else. But reality is that in a startup, as you keep on experimenting, you have to find a way to take your successes and make them repeatable. You have to codify it, you have to tell everybody else in the company about it and show them how to do the same thing over and over again. Because if you don't do that, then every time you will go out and reinvent the wheel. And that is no way to grow anything, because by making the same mistakes over and over again. So, stage 4 is process. So you've had a vision, you have experimented against that vision, now you're trying to crystallize that into a set of processes that work for you. Next stage, and this is the fifth and the last stage in the beginning of a startup, is this. So what Siddharth does now, so he's worked out the processes, he made all his little houses and he's trying to put them together. The thing is that when he's trying to put these together into bigger shapes, trying to essentially fulfill the vision that he has in his head, now he tries to find pieces that he could not use before, or pieces that have been lying around that he didn't look at before. Before, he used to take whatever was in front of him, stick it in and see if that makes anything. Now he looks around for stuff that will make his vision work, which means he is learning to anticipate his own needs and then find a way to fill them. And this is the 5th stage in taking your company from complete chaos towards some order. This is a stage that you can call anticipation, but maybe the more common term for this would be strategy. So all this while, your startup has been struggling, doing things day-to-day operations kind of a thing. But this is a stage at which you need to take a step back from just doing your stuff every day and fighting fires and taking care of issues and counseling unhappy customers, to a situation where you're looking out 6 months later or 1 year later, trying to find what is going to happen then, and then building that into your processes and your way of doing things now. And if you have reached this stage, which is the stage of strategy or anticipation, if you have reached this stage, then first of all, I would like to congratulate you. More importantly, you have reached a point where you have gone from nothing, which means complete chaos, to a real organization, or at least the beginnings of an organization, which means you have created a lot of order out of that. So, this is essentially what I wanted to communicate to you. To summarize, what we have learned here, or I hope what you have tried to understand is, 1, creating a startup is inherently about building order out of chaos. Do a lot of different things. In fact is that is ultimately what you're doing. 2, there are 5 stages in creating this order. First stage is desire, you have to want to do it. Second stage is vision, which means you have to know what it is that you're trying to do. Third stage is experimentation, so you have to keep trying out new things and see what works for your vision. Fourth stage is process. You take all your successful experiments, codify it, make it repeatable. And the fifth stage is strategy, which means now that you've got essentially your basic structure done, look out into the future and see what you need to do to take your business or your startup to the next level. And this is where I think you get poised for growth, for success, for future prospects and whatever new thing it is that you're doing. Most importantly, in order to do any of this, you need to find your inner child. And that I think is an idea worth studying. Thank you.